Hey everybody, how you doing today? I like to talk about injecting magic into your code today. Now, what do I mean by injecting magic into your code? One of the biggest stumbling blocks that a lot of developers encounter, especially in the C# realm, is things will just happen and you don't know what happened. Junior developers get snagged by this all the time. You expect to see an action and a result, an action and a result. In other words, we call something and we see a result. 1 + 1 = 2, that sort of thing. That's not magic. Magic is when you start running some code and all of a sudden something happens and you're like, what just happened? And magic is good when you understand what's going on and you understand the code base, but it's really, really bad if you don't know what's actually going on. Magic will trip you up every time. One of the biggest tricks that I've discovered is to get a tool like Camtasia, which is a screen recording utility, and watch the flow by just debugging and stepping through code to see exactly what's happening. Now, in .NET Core, a lot of magic happens. And it starts right at the program.cs level. And it's good because, again, it's not really magic. It's just we don't realize something is happening in the background. It's really important for you to understand exactly what is in your .NET, or sorry, your when you're running .NET Core, what's inside of your actual program.cs. In the older versions, they had the program.cs and the startup.cs. So you had to look at both those files to understand the magic, and sometimes they'll actually take a lot of these bits and pieces and extract them off into its own file. So again, you gotta watch out for the magic. Now, one of the stumbling blocks that a lot of junior devs, even intermediate devs I've seen, get caught on is something called AutoMapper. The idea behind AutoMapper is to allow you to quickly and easily migrate between one object type and another. And when you do that, you're actually creating you're not creating a reference to a previous object type. You're actually creating a whole new object and it's a different object type the whole 9 yards. So inside of AutoMapper, like in this particular program I just wrote here, we have a map.config, and inside of our map.config, what's happening is we have created a few mappings, and in these mappings say, you can convert between my database object called a country, and I have a create country DTO and I have a get country DTO, for example. Doesn't matter. What's important here is to understand that this is a little bit of magic that's happening in the background. So when I go to use that, what can happen is, and I would call this half magic, because you do see a command. There is a command for it. I can call a mapper right there. Okay. Now it looks pretty insidious. It doesn't look like it's doing anything major, but it's doing a lot of things in the background. And especially mappers can get you into a lot of trouble if you're not careful, because with mapping, you're assuming, or you're hoping that your names do match up, because the way AutoMapper works is it will look for an ID property in both sides, and if it sees it in the same place, same name, it'll just map the data across. But let's say you took an object and you mapped it into another object, okay, in the inheriting object. It won't be able to do that unless you tell it inside of the actual mapper config how to actually handle that. And this is not a mapper tutorial, this is a magic tutorial. So, and also to another program, and I'm not going to show it in the code here, that can really catch you up, is called Fluent Validation. If you're using that, it's a great tool, fantastic tool. You can do some pretty awesome stuff with Fluent Validation. It's a validation tool, much like some of the magic that's built into the box here. Another example of magic that can occur in your code, we talked about the AutoMapper Fluent Validation, is the built-in .NET Core validation. You get kind of used to it, so what happens is you don't really see it anymore. When you're using things like Entity Framework, things like that, you can use different tools inside of your code. And let me just show you something here. Like inside of country, because we're using entity, what's happening is it sees an ID, and that becomes a required field. It's got to be there. And then not necessarily when you're actually creating the object or you're putting it in as an entry, but it's when you're getting done. Now, for example, inside of my country DTO, which is actually collecting information to create a new country, I've got a required header field here. Now, this is the built-in .NET Core validation. And what happens is when that particular inside of the controller, when the controller, and this is magic that can really catch up here, by the way. Let's say we go to our post method here. What's happening is it's looking for the create country DTO. Unbeknownst to us, there is magic happening in the background. And that magic is that the .NET Core framework is actually going in and it is looking. If it sees that required field and I try to create a country, for example, let's go here and try to create a country. So here we go. We have a country. We know that when we go back and we look at our country DTO, especially on the create, it has a required field there. The name has to be there, okay? So in this particular example, we're about to do a post action where it's going to be creating a country, and we've got no name. It's empty. So when I run that, it's going to run out there. It's going to try to do its work, but it's going to come back and say, hey, one or more validation errors occur. The name field is required. Again, this is what can confuse a developer. I'm going to put a breakpoint right at the very beginning of that particular post event, okay? And I'm going to go back here and I'm going to execute. Did you notice we didn't hit our break? And that's what's important here. This is the magic I'm talking about. What's happening is, as this method is being called and this DTO is received, this DTO is being automatically checked in the background. Data transfer object, if you don't know what a DTO is, it's being automatically checked by its actual type. Its type class, okay? And name is required. So what's happening is there's no name. So it can't receive that particular, or I can't create that object in memory to be processed. So even before we strike our get point, our breakpoint at the beginning of this method, magic has already occurred, and that's my point here. So keep your eyes on things like that. That's what I'm going to touch today. I think this is a really important topic to touch. Again, if I could sit down and get $1 for every hour that's lost by developers who are struggling with a bit of magic in code, I'd be a very rich guy right now, because I know I've wasted a lot of hours over the years with new methods, new things that are happening that I just don't see what's going on, but things are happening in the background, and we have to remember that. So watch out for magic in your code. Very important. Hope this helps you today. Hey, if you found this useful, please do like this video and subscribe. Thanks so much.